Hello everyone. Recently, I've been reading Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and The Last Man, and central to his analysis is his conception of human nature. He believes that human nature is driven by two primary desires. The first, for pleasure, for satisfaction of our pleasure drive, what Freud would have called the libido, but Fukuyama doesn't reduce that just to sexual pleasure. He believes essentially material satisfaction is what we crave. That drives a lot of our activity. But also, we have what he calls themos, which might be translated as self-esteem, the desire for recognition. And Fukuyama divides this into two distinct categories. One is megalothymia. This is the desire for glory, the desire to be recognized as superior to others. In Fukuyama's view, this has been the primary driving force of history, because as people seek to be recognized as superior from others, they will seek to dominate others, they will seek to prove their superiority. In so doing, they engage in acts of violence to put others in an inferior position to themselves. They will rob them, they will kill them, they will conquer their cultures. Something like the British Empire or American slavery is a social consequence of megalothymia, of that desire to be seen as superior. And for Fukuyama, this is what drives history, because it is the conflicts between people who want to be recognized as superior and won't give it to each other, which in turn brings about political intrigue, revolution and war, so on and so forth. This is also, however, the cause of greatness, artistic greatness, brilliance and genius. People like Leonardo da Vinci engaging in their arts and their studies because they want to be seen as superior. And Fukuyama identifies Nietzsche as the primary exponent of megalothymia in the modern world, that he wants us to return to a society where those who are superior, the aristocrats, as it were, of the soul, they should be elevated to the highest levels. They should be set free to do so in society and to rule it as our superiors and be recognized as such. However, Fukuyama also identifies that there is something called Isothymia, which is the desire to be recognized as an equal. And in his view, after the wars of religion in the 17th century, Enlightenment thinkers such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, particularly in the liberal tradition, wanted to move away from a society driven by the desire for power and superiority, for glory, because in their view this caused the devastating wars which they lived through. Consequently, they wanted a society which was ordered according to universal reason, the principles of rationality, and to desire, essentially desire for pleasure. And this has its fundamental outworking and synthesis in Benthamite and Millian hedonism, where the rational thing to do is that which is the greatest good or brings about the greatest amount of pleasure and reduces the most amount of harm for the greatest number of people. In Fukuyama's view, this is the dominant mode of thought within our current liberal democracies. And as such, equality reigns over superiority. We want recognition as equals, and those who want it recognition as a superior are judged badly for this. In so doing, we have created a society of what he calls last men. This is a phrase he borrows from Nietzsche, and indeed he quotes Nietzsche giving this passage describing the last man. This is Nietzsche. One still works, for work is a form of entertainment. But one is careful lest the entertainment be too harrowing. One no longer becomes poor or rich. Both require too much exertion. Who still wants to rule? Who obey? Both require too much exertion. No shepherd and one herd. Everybody wants the same. Everybody is the same. Whoever feels different goes voluntarily into the madhouse. The last man is fundamentally not a creature seeking to be recognized as superior to others. Rather, the last man seeks comfort. He seeks pleasure, primarily material pleasure, and safety. He doesn't want to be threatened. He doesn't have anything to give his life for, so he does not want to risk the threat of death. Indeed, he is also a creature who is willing to give up various freedoms in the pursuit of this comfort. While Fukuyama thinks that the last man belongs solely to liberal democracy, Byung-Chul has pointed out that in light of recent events, we must see that actually the logic of the last man is thoroughly authoritarian. Over the last couple of years, we've seen liberal democracies turn into authoritarian states in reaction to the pandemic, that they have locked down their citizens under very stringent rules for the sake of their preservation, and the citizens, by and large, have been supportive of these moves. Why is that? If these people were desiring freedom primarily, they would have revolted, they would have opposed these measures. But if, like Fukuyama and Byung-Chul, we see the last man as a creature who seeks comfort and safety first and foremost, then the last man's quite willing to give over all of his freedoms to the biomedical security state, because they will make sure he is happy and well fed and safe. So it is not necessarily a product of liberal democracy so much as the result of a society which is willing to care for the individual. And in this situation, there is no need to be superior to another, because one has their desires already satisfied. Thus, we reach the end of history. There is no more need for conflict. At least, that is Fukuyama's prediction within this book. However, he does mark a cautionary tone, pointing out that even if our material desires are satisfied, our desires for pleasure, Isothymia is hard to achieve. We want to be recognised with dignity, with respect, to feel valued in a society. And where there isn't this drive for superiority, it's very difficult to accept this recognition of equality. It's even hard to achieve that. So we will see people probably fall back into megalothymia, and conflict will begin again. Now, I wanted to comment on an important aspect of Fukuyama's ideas here, which is, for him, part of what drives the shift from megalothymia to isothymia, or a society moving from one to the other, is the importance of modern education, which he believes relativizes worldviews and values. It teaches us that the morals of earlier generations are historically contingent. They are particular to a certain people at a certain time at a certain place. Thus, they do not have transcendent or universal meaning. But in so doing, they undermine the pull of these values upon our lives. Why would I give my life for a set of values which I know to be relative to a culture? My ancestor may have believed that these things were universally binding upon all people, but I don't believe that. I know that that was from that time and that place that idea arose. So it no longer has the same grasp upon me. In so doing, then, relativism undermines all moral systems. It prevents them from demanding my attention and my obedience. Consequently, we are left without any system which can demand me to rise up and seek superiority or even to give up my life for them, which is the ultimate act of megalothymia. Instead, all that's left are my desires, my desire for pleasure and my desire for recognition. Ironically, Fukuyama is himself engaged in relativization in this book, because he is trying to psychologize the heroic mindset. He's suggesting that what drives people is fundamentally a desire that needs to be satisfied, a desire to be recognized, in this case one of superiority, recognized as superior. And one can't but help think that he's been influenced in some way by Alfred Adler's idea of the inferiority complex, that although all people seek to overcome obstacles because they want to overcome a feeling of inferiority, this can be pushed too far. This can become an obsession, and in that case, a complex leads to damaging and dangerous behaviors, demanding that other people recognize us as superior. Fukuyama's very much tying into that psychoanalytical idea, which has its roots in Freudianism. In so doing, he himself is saying that all of history has not been driven by people who are committed to ideas, committed to certain values which have an integrity of their own. Fundamentally, these are epiphenomena. They're on the surface of a much deeper desire, which is the desire for glory. Thus, he himself, this very schema, is in itself undermining the heroic. And we can compare this with somebody like Thomas Carlyle, who in his study of the heroic does not reduce the hero to a certain psychological state of mind, but rather sees it as absolute sincerity sincerity in what one believes. So, for Muhammad and Cromwell and Robert Burns and William Shakespeare, what they believe is different, but they are absolutely committed to it. They will throw off the shackles of their culture to attend to what they believe is genuinely true about reality. And that thing which they share is the underlying nature of the thing that they're committed to, which is some sort of universal law. There is weight behind their values. They are driven by something more than their own satisfaction. It is a commitment, it is a love for something higher than themselves. They're willing to give of themselves for this thing in an unconditional way. None of this can feature in Fukuyama. A love for family, country, and God cannot be the primary motivation. It is a desire for recognition for him. And thus, all of these things lose their transcendent and thus demanding pull upon our souls. In the same way, something like elite theory can also end up in this place. For Pareto, ideas are merely the post hoc rationalization of our feelings. And as a consequence, when people give their political philosophy or points of view, when they justify their actions according to certain principles, these ideas are not in themselves of value or of truth. Rather, they are the rationalizations of a desire for power, a desire for superiority. Similarly, the red pill or the pick-up artist approach, which seeks to reduce all male and female interactions down to the game of sex, well, again, we see that our ideas of romance, of love, of a transcendent order binding upon these things are seen as incidental at best. At worst, they get in the way. They're not They're not really part of this world. The actual mechanics of it are defined according to the game. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that as soon as you give an entirely universal explanation of all human activity according to psychological categories, you end up in a situation where you have undermined that which gives the heroic its life force, which is that there are things higher than ourselves worthy of being loved. You abolish that from the world, from the possibility for people to follow. And so we need to be very careful if we're going to give grand explanations about how that might fit in to the relativization of moral frameworks, of values and meanings, and in so doing result in nihilism. Fukuyama's book is interesting because while it is trying to grapple with the transition from a society which prizes the heroic, the desire for glory, and the desire for recognition as an equal, he himself is engaged in this project surreptitiously. And we need to be attentive to that when we're engaging in our own discussions. Have a good day.